Hey everyone, it's Pat Keegan and welcome back to the DIY Home Build channel. This video is a companion video to a piece of software I wrote using Microsoft Excel for doing some simple cabinet calculations. It's also a way for me to kind of combine a couple of the Excel spreadsheets that people have asked me to post. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through that. But basically the impetus for the cabinet calculator tool that I'm about to show you, I got that idea, kind of from some people who, on the YouTube videos who posted that, they were struggling with getting proficient at Google SketchUp. I posted several videos using Google SketchUp that I used for the design and display of the cabinets, and I kind of walked you through some pictures and diagrams using that Google SketchUp. And I personally use Google SketchUp a lot when I'm doing built-in cabinets, mostly to communicate most effectively with a client, but also sometimes I'll use it myself to make sure I can kind of sketch something out and get the dimensions right, before I actually start building the thing, and for more complicated cabinets. But kitchen cabinets, which is really what this is kind of designed for, are basic level cabinets. Um, those cabinets are fairly standard, so there are formulas that you can use, or I can do these things kind of in my head most of the time nowadays, but I realize when you're first starting out that, and again, that's what that series was geared for, the folks who are kind of just starting out or thinking about wanting to make cabinets. It's not as easy to do it in your head, and I realize that it just takes time and practice. So I created this kind of software piece here in response to that, because I did not mean to imply or want to imply that you had to learn to use Google SketchUp in order to successfully create cabinets. Oftentimes you can do a sketch on a piece of paper, and then if you do that sketch and take some measurements with a tape measure, then you can just use this tool if you want to try to use this tool and make kind of a very quick a cut list for yourself. And this will be available on the website. It's free right now. If I find that people are requesting a lot of work on the tool, may have to change that. But for right now, it's free. So but anyway, this is the companion video to work the tool. So let's start with the cabinet calculator. But actually, before we go there, I just wanted to say there's obviously a disclaimer up here. You probably can't read that in the video, but it's the typical small font. It basically just says that, look, I'm offering this software kind of as is. I've done reasonable diligence to make sure that the formulas are correct, but I'm a human being and I'm prone to mistakes, but I'm not going to be responsible if you don't check your own measurements and then commit to a project, and then accidentally make a wrong cut based on what the tool told you to do, and the tool has a mistake in it and ends up costing you, like, thousands of dollars. Clearly that's not the intent here. Software has defects in it at any given time, and just is basically just saying that you're responsible to basically measure twice and check the calculations just to be sure. So I put a bunch of hyperlinks in here to these pages. So let's go to the cabinet calculator first. Basically, and you can always, from a navigational standpoint, if you're familiar with Excel, you can just click on these tabs on the bottom. But if you're not, you can just use these little hyperlinks at the top of every page to get to where you want to. Home always brings you back to this place. So this is the simple cabinet calculator. I do want to note that all of the spreadsheet formulas are built on the assumption that you're using this pocket hole joinery as your construction method for both the face frames and the cabinet carcasses or the boxes. And if you're using the more traditional dado and rabbet joinery, I have not covered that here. So you will have to adjust your measurements accordingly. If there's enough demand, I could certainly take some time and add that. But for right now, this is a companion video to the kitchen cabinet series that we had on YouTube, and it is geared for that construction. So it assumes that you're not going to take a router and groove a dado or a rabbet and then keep the board, insert your bottom and top shelves into that, for example. So um, it's a real simple cabinet right now. So this is what I call a 2SR or a 2S2R, which is a two style, two rail cabinet frame type, which is pretty much as simple as it gets. And it basically means I have two styles, one on the left, one on the right, and two rails, one at the top and one at the bottom. But even though that's a very simple cabinet, there's a lot of these variables that you can change very quickly. The way this sheet kind of works here is you are allowed to change a certain number of these fields over here, and then instantly you're going to see when you hit the return key after changing any data in these cells, you're going to get to see the changes immediately here. And that will be actually very helpful when you have a lot of similar cabinets to build the cut list for, but then you might want to just change one or two variables. So in any case, let's talk about these different sections. So I'm going to try to go rapidly through this. If you have questions, you can either post them to the video or on the actual website where you're going to go to download this Excel spreadsheet. So the overall dimensions of the cabinet are basically just your height, your width, and your depth. Kitchen cabinets particularly are fairly standardized. They generally come in increments of 3 inches for all these dimensions. So you can get a 30-inch cabinet or a 33 or a 36 or a 24. Same with the cabinet depth. You can get a 9, a 12, a 15, and as well as the height, you can get a 24 or a 36 or a 42. So if you hover over these cells with the red triangles in it, you can clearly see that, I kind of standardize that, but it tells you what the measurement actually is. So from the overall cabinet width, that's from outside edge to outside edge of the face frames. That's a standard measurement. Even though the face frame may be the widest part on the cabinet, that when they talk about a 30-inch cabinet, that's what they're talking about, is the width from those 2 points. The cabinet depth includes the face frame thickness. Typical face frame construction is 3/4 of an inch thick. So the 12 inches that you see here, for example, it includes that face frame thickness. So if I want to build a 12-inch cabinet, deep cabinet with a 3/4 inch face frame, that means that the carcass sides need to be 11 1/4, so that when I add that 3/4 face frame thickness that I specify here, it comes out to the 12 inches that you see. Overall cabinet height here is 42 inches. Again, that's just whatever it is, one of the cabinet heights that I chose. This typically is done when you want the cabinets to go all the way up to the ceiling and there's no soffit, and you have a standard 8-foot ceiling with no soffit. So let's change this up a little bit here as we go through this, just so you can see that it actually works. So let's call this cabinet microwave. And we're going to build a 24-inch tall cabinet to go above the microwave. And so if you see here, when I push return, you're going to see the name here change where it says cut list. So as I push return, I've named my cabinet and that name is reflected here. That's important because you're going to add this whole box to your cut list when we're done. And you can do this multiple times so that you can have a good printout of it. Let's leave it at 30 inches, but let's change the depth to be 16 inches. And again, you'll watch these measurements change as I hit return. So now, magically now I've got a 15 1/4 inch side that I have to cut, side panels that I have to cut, two of them at 15 1/4 and 42 for the sides. Because again, the face frame thickness needs to be added to that. The panel thicknesses. Okay, so in our kitchen cabinet series, we had 3/4 inch thick plywood for every element of our carcasses for our cabinets. That's not always typical. Certainly, you can save a little bit of money if you want to change, for example, the back panel thickness. But again, this was designed for um, um, pocket hole joinery construction techniques. So if you change this to be 1/4 inch, you're not going to be able to use a pocket hole. And so you're going to have to figure out another way to mount that. You could probably get away with a 1/2 inch or even 5/8. And you'll see that, not 15/8, 5/8. And you'll see here that it automatically adjusted the top and the bottom accordingly. So again, specific to the way we built the cabinets in the videos, where the sides and the back um, basically run the width um, of the cabinet. So let's change this to be a 24-inch, 30 inches wide by 16 deep by 24 inches high. And then you can see it automatically made these adjustments here. So um, this would be then the left, the cut list for the actual carcass parts. And I always make the left side, the right side, and the back the same dimension in terms of its length, so that they're very easy to put together very quickly. And then the top and bottom sit in recesses, in terms of, I usually recess the top down a half an inch and the bottom up about an inch and a quarter, to compensate for the 2-inch face frame. So we can change the panel thicknesses, which are going to which are going to work together with the recesses, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, but let's just leave them everything at 3/4, because that's what we did in the videos. But it's just know that you can change them if you really need to, provided you're going to use pocket holes. Let's talk about the face frame. So this one, um, as compared to the panel thickness section, I only let you change the sides and the top and bottom as one component. In other words, I didn't allow for the fact that you would have like a 3/4 inch left side panel and a half inch a right side panel, and a different top thickness than a bottom thickness. It just doesn't really make sense for the methods that we use. So the top and bottom would be the same, the sides would be the same, and the back is whatever you want it to be. So from the face frame, though, I did allow you to change either the left style, the right style, the top rail, or the bottom rail. And the reason I did this was twofold. The top rail needs to be able to be changed, because if you're going in an upper cabinet, typically you'll want the top rail to be a little bit wider than the rest of the face frame styles and rails, in terms of width, so that you can accommodate molding at the top of the cabinet, like crown molding. If you're going to install crown molding, you really want more than just your 2-inch top rail width or something. You may want something a little bit wider. Similarly, on your left and your right styles, this gets a little complicated to explain without another picture, which I don't have prepared. But effectively, um, if you have a door that has a half-inch overlay, and you have a 2-inch wide face frame, then on any given cabinet, an inch and a half of that face frame is going to be visible to the eye. So if you butt two cabinets up together, um, a left, the cabinet, and they both have doors on them, you're going to end up with a 3-inch gap between the two doors, the right door of the one cabinet and the left door of the other, or vice versa. And so you don't really want that to be that wide. If you want like kind of a uniform inch and a half gap, if you will, between any cabinet door and another object, then you're going to want to shrink down your left or your right styles. And in fact, you may, let's say this cabinet is going to go on the end of a row of cabinets, then you might want the right style to still be 2 inches, but the left one to kind of marry up to the right style of a yet another cabinet. So you have to give that some thought for aesthetic purposes, unless you want this big 3-inch gap between your cabinets. So um, and a lot of you can walk into a lot of kitchens and look at these things and you can see them. So for example, if I wanted to put two cabinets together with these half-inch overlay doors, and I wanted a inch and a half gap, then I'm going to need 3/4 on each cabinet plus the half-inch overlay, and this would be 1 1/4, like so. And so that's why I allowed you to kind of change each of these individual pieces, because you may want to end up doing that. So anyway, there you have it. In terms of recesses, this is kind of what I talk about. I'll start with the back because that's the easiest. I always recess my back panel in from the back edges of the left and right side walls of the cabinet. And the reason is to compensate for any anomalies that might happen with with the wall, so that if there's any bumps or waves in the wall, I can utilize that recess to kind of absorb it a little bit, or I can trim off one of the 1/4 inch nubs, if you will, that are sticking out like the back edge of the cabinet. I can shave that down on one side if I need to without having to remove the back of the cabinet. So that's why I always leave a 1/4 inch recess of that back panel. Similarly, if I've got two cabinets that are butting up to each other, then I'm going to do a 1/4 inch recess from the edge of the face frame there. And so do you need a 1/4 inch? No, that's probably could be too wide. You could shrink these down to 1/8. And again, it's going to change your measurements here for everything. Um, but I typically use a 1/4 inch recess, and all that means is that if I butt one cabinet against a wall, again, I want that same 1/4 inch recessed like from the left side. So I talk about this extensively in the cabinet videos, and a lot of the cabinet videos have people who've posted questions to this. So that's why there's a left side. A left side or a right side recess just means that the panel is actually doesn't come all the way up to the edge of the face frame. It's a 1/4 of an inch in from the edge of the face frame on either side. And again, for example, let's say this cabinet on the left side is going to have another cabinet butting against it, but on the right side it's going to be exposed to the kitchen or exposed to a room where it's going to be visible. Well, then I don't want any recess here. So I'll put a 0 here, and then it alters my cabinet dimensions accordingly. But let's just assume that this cabinet is going to be mounted between two cabinets, so I'm going to want a left and a right recess on either side. The final two things here we're coming up to, the toe kick. All you need to do is specify whether you have a toe kick or not. So if it's a microwave cabinet, you're not going to probably have a toe kick. But if it's a base cabinet, like a sink base, then you're probably going to have a toe kick. So you just say yes. Saying yes automatically adjusts the stiles and the rails here, the stiles rather, not the rails, to compensate for the fact that you have a toe kick, so the stile doesn't need to go all the way down to the bottom of the cabinet. It's going to cut it off about 3.5 inches, and it makes sense. So here you can specify your toe kick height. If you only want a 3 inch toe kick, I wouldn't go much shorter than 3 inches. I typically go 3.5. And so if you have toe kicks set to yes, then it's going to include and incorporate that. Let's talk doors. So it's a simple cabinet. It's got two stiles and two rails, which means that the cabinet will not have a middle rail. So if you or a middle stile. So if you want to put a stile where both your doors will rest in the middle, then you're going to have to make some alterations with respect to these measurements. But so this is a tool that right now there's a lot to go into cabinets and a lot to go into these types of tools. So that's why it's complicated to do, and that's why software companies charge a lot of money for cabinet design software that automatically generates your cut lists, especially if they're more flexible. But anyway, there's two things that you want. So this one you can actually select 0, 1, or 2 doors. If you select no doors, because let's say your cabinet you don't want any doors on it because you have glass shelves or something like that, then it's going to put not applicable into these cells because you've specified no doors. If you have one door, then it's going to take into account the fact of what the overlay is. I typically use a 1/2 inch overlay on all my doors. That means that the door is oversized for the opening by a 1/2 inch on all sides. So you can see here that it basically takes into account, the stile and the rail widths and everything that you have. If I change this left stile width over here to 1 inch, say for example, you'll notice that the width of the door changes accordingly. So it's changed from 27 to 28. But let's go back to 2 inches because that's what we typically do. Um, so now the gap between the doors, I typically use an 1/8 inch gap between doors if I've got two doors and no middle rail, which is what we did in the kitchen series set of videos. If you want, you can do less or no. You can, if you do no gap, it won't do anything if you only have one door. But if you select two doors, now that gap between doors comes into play. So again, if I change this to 1/8, you're going to see these numbers change in the width, and they'll drop from 1/2 to 7/16, just like that. So what does that mean? It means if I want an eighth of an inch gap between the doors, then I'm basically going to split the difference and take a 16th off of one door and a 16th off the other in order to facilitate that eighth inch gap. You can do 3/16 gap if you want. I don't know, that probably crashed the thing. Yeah, it does. So it makes it 13/32, but nobody really makes a door 13/32. The hinges that you get, if you get decent hinges, I get these XN3 hinges. So basically, they can compensate and help move the door if I need a slightly wider gap. So usually I just leave that at 1/8. Okay, so we've made all the specifications to these cabinets, and it's automatically generated this cut list. So now I kind of want to save this cut list for this one microwave cabinet. And I just do that by pressing this button. You press the add to cut list. It gives you a little box that says cabinet added to the cut list sheet, and you push OK. Now, if you go to the cut list sheet, you can see that your microwave cabinet has been added here. So it's there, it's saved, for you for later. You can print this sheet out if you want, for your cut list and print it off. I haven't yet run the function or created the function to summarize. So in other words, you don't want to, it would be nice to have like a little summary over here, which I'm going to work on later, that basically counts how many pieces in all your cabinets are the same dimension and then says, I need 5 at this length and width, I need 4 at this length and width, blah, blah, blah. But until then, they're just kind of individually printed out. So if I go back to the cabinet calculator, let's do another cabinet and call this one the sink base. Notice how the name changed. Let's make the sink base 36 inches wide. We're going to make it 24 inches deep because that's a standard base cabinet. Cabinet height is going to be 34.5 because that's standard height. See, these things get pretty easy. I'm going to leave the panel thicknesses the same. I'm going to leave the face frame thickness. I'm going to make it 2 inches all the way around. 2 inches all the way around on every style and rail because, I don't know, that's the way I want it. And then sink base, yeah, we'll leave that between a couple cabinets. So, well, let's do this. Let's leave the sink base exposed to the kitchen, so I don't want any right side recess of that. I want the right panel to be flush with the face frame because it's going to be stained. Yes, I definitely want a toe kick. And I'm going to have 2 doors on this one with all the same overlay and gap as I've had on the other ones. You can see here that it's automatically printed out the pieces that you need, the tops, the bottoms. Now, the top and the bottom on a base cabinet would be negligible. So I haven't put that functionality in yet. I'll make a note to do that. But you don't want a top on your base cabinets. You just want 2 stretchers. So you can ignore that for the, I'll even make a quick note here. I could say something like, I'll make a note to ignore that. But in any case, so that's what I mean. You got to be smart and kind of check everything over to make sure it gives you the styles and the rails, it gives you the door widths and everything that you need, and then you just add that to cut list. You say okay, go to your cut list sheet. Ooh, and there's the sink base. When you're all done, it tells you the number of cabinets you have. This is a changeable number, but do not change this number. Just leave it alone. If you end up messing up something in this sheet and something like starts not working, just re-download the sheet from the website. And then I've got a button here that allows you to just clear the entire sheet if you want, and it's all done and you can start over. So that's been a quick tutorial here of the cabinet calculator and the cut list sheet. Just very quickly, because I know this video is already very long, I included this compartment calculator here. This basically just calculates if you're going to have partitions, like when we did the mobile shop cart video, if you're going to have an even number of evenly spaced compartments in a cabinet, then this automatically calculates for you based on your partition. So again, if I'm making a partition out of 3/4 inch plywood, I want 4 spaces, and my box is going to be 97 or 96.5 inches long. Then it automatically will calculate how many partitions, and then the compartment size, which is what you would put in, a spacer block to space that out. So these are just for, this is a very quick compartment calculator that I made for the old mobile shop card video that we did in another one of our videos. So it's there in this same sheet. And then just to finish this off, I've got a manual cut list template. It's got a bunch of stuff in there already that we used for a sink base. This is not generated from any um, code. This is just a manual thing, so you can go ahead and delete all this stuff and put in whatever you want. If you really want to do it the manual way, that's okay too. So anyway, that's been the tutorial. So I hope you can make use of this tool. If you don't want to get to use SketchUp, if you got any questions, go ahead and leave them at the video, and hopefully it works out for you. By the way, if there's any bugs or errors or defects in the software, please just let me know, and I'll try to get an updated version out. It's also important that if you want to be notified of updates to the tool, if I make improvements on it or continue to develop it a little bit, I know that they already have, like, cabinet software, but this is just stuff I like to do in the meantime. Um, I'm going to put our website here that you can go to download the tool and to sign up for our email list. I promise I'm not going to use it as a spam generator, but if you want to be kept in notice of, or kept up to speed with our changes and the versions of other stuff that we do, you'll want to hop on the mail list. It's on the front page of our blog at DIYHomebuilt.net. But I'll put those links in here before I publish the tool. Anyway, hope it's been helpful at least a little bit, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.